One of the best lessons for me was one that I learned late in life when I was thinking about the story of him meeting my mom. And quite frankly, when you go through that detail, it's amazing that I'm here. Because the chances of that happening, him meeting my mom and getting married, was very, very remote. He went to a dance on a Saturday night. He saw a lady that caught his eye. Took him all night to ask her to dance. He finally did that by the end of the night, got one dance and said, "Can I take you home?" And she said no. Now, there's no phone, there's no cell phone, there's no internet, there's no email, okay? And he's living in the YMCA in downtown Johnstown, working at the steel mill. And 2 weeks later, he takes a walk down the street, Main Street, Johnstown. And who's coming the other way but my mom? What are the chances? He talks to her. He said, "I would like to see you." And she says, "Okay, come on by." So they go out. I think they got something to eat. And at the end of the evening, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And she said no. And he was persistent. And ultimately, they went out again. And the second time, as my dad tells it, my mom came home and talked to her brother, my Uncle Joe, and said, "I've just met my husband. I've just met my husband." Now, the chances of all that happening, from my point of view, are very remote. And what that tells me, it reminds me that each one of us are so special. So what he demonstrated intuitively, I've had to study and reflect on, and it's taken me a lot, takes me a lot of my life to get the lesson. That every person is special, whether we agree with them or not, no matter what color, race, age, it doesn't matter. Even political beliefs, which is very hard for me when people are opposite of my political beliefs. But I work on understanding how important it is for us to love the essence of everyone. My dad did that. He taught us that example by how he lived. Another great example was honor thy father and thy mother. How did he teach us that? By example. Before I was 6, before my brothers were born, and we lived in a very small apartment in Kernville, on a Saturday morning, we often would stand by the bus line because we had no car. And we would get on the bus, me and my dad, and we'd go to Listi, Pennsylvania, and visit my grandmother. And my dad would take me, and my grandmother spoke Ukrainian, Russian. He spoke with her, he would interpret. But she loved me, and he loved me. He walked me on the grounds, and I looked at this house with an outhouse, and I couldn't fathom, and still can't, how 9 children grew up in this house. I can't imagine it. Actually, when I visit our home that we grew up in, I can't remember how 4 children grew up in that home with 2 parents. But we did. And it was great. And he always taught me by example, and occasionally he would say, "Steve, your mother hasn't heard from you in a while." That's all he had to say. I would call, I would write, I would visit when I could. Another example, do not carry grudges, do not carry anger. Do not carry that with you, that negative experience, those negative emotions. Now, how did he teach me that? Well, there's many stories. The man was with us 92 years. So there's a lot of stories, but one in particular, my parents came to visit me in Columbus, Ohio, on a weekend. They did that fairly frequently in the younger days. And, let's just say it was another one of those periods of time when I wasn't really getting along with my mother. And about half of that weekend, we weren't talking to each other. I don't remember Doesn't matter. I don't remember what the problem was that time, but it was a problem. Okay. So on Sunday afternoon, they were getting ready to leave to come back to Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And my dad took me and my mother and said, "You guys sit down here on this couch." And all he said was, "You need to talk. I'm going outside. And we're not leaving until you talk." And we talked. And at the end of that conversation, I hugged my mom. I told her how much I loved her. But that's how my dad was. Didn't have to say much. He just lived it. He just lived it. So, there's a lot of lessons. As he has passed, his physical form has passed, I reflect on a lot of these stories, and we could be here a long time today talking about those stories and lessons. But I'm studying those lessons. He had them mastered from the time he was born. I'm still working on that mastery in a number of areas. But I am so grateful for this man. He led by example. He taught us by example. And this example today is another major lesson. Father Baroni, and by the way, Father, thank you so much for this service and your words. It's wonderful. And Father Baroni delivered us a message really about life after death. And it is important, and it's comforting to think that my father is now in bliss. And as my brothers talked about his last couple months, and he smiled through all the difficulty. That his difficulties from a physical point of view are all over. And he is in bliss. And that's a wonderful message. It's wonderful to know that he's with us today, along with my mom, along with my sister, and everyone that's preceded us, celebrating this event. And I celebrate his passing while I experience the physical pain of the separation. Thank you all for being here today. And Dad, I do love you, and yes, I miss you terribly.